I should have moved his arm hours ago. That's what I tell myself as I lie here in the guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling that I painted 3 summers ago when Clara decided the house needed refreshing. The paint job looks different in this light, in this silence that feels thick enough to drown in. Elias's breathing has settled into the rhythm of deep sleep, and his arm rests across my chest like it belongs there. It doesn't belong there. Nothing about this belongs anywhere in the life I've built, but I can't bring myself to move. The weight of his arm pins me to this narrow bed, and maybe that's what I need right now. To be held down. To be forced to feel the warmth of his skin through the thin cotton of my t-shirt, the steady rise and fall of his chest against my shoulder. His face is turned toward me, slack with exhaustion and grief. 3 days ago, he buried his mother. 2 days ago, he called me at midnight, his voice hollow and broken. Yesterday, he showed up at my door with nothing but a duffel bag and eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to hope for anything. Clara had been kind about it, the way she's kind about everything. She'd made up the guest room without questions, heated leftover casserole, asked gentle questions about the funeral. She'd kissed my forehead before heading upstairs and told me to take care of him. If only she knew what taking care of him was doing to me. I whisper his name into the darkness. Elias. Just to hear it, just to feel the shape of it in my mouth. He doesn't stir. His breathing stays even, peaceful in a way mine hasn't been since he arrived. Above us, I can hear the old house settling into itself. Clara's breathing through the thin walls. The children, safe in their beds, dreaming whatever children dream about. My son probably still clutching that worn stuffed elephant. My daughter with her hair spread across her pillow like spun gold. They have no idea their father is lying here in the guest room, trembling beneath the touch of another man. The only man I've ever wanted to tremble for. The shame of it cuts through me, sharp and familiar. 43 years old and still lying awake like a teenager, heart hammering against my ribs because someone is touching me. Because Elias is touching me, and it feels like coming home and falling apart all at once. This wasn't the first time he held me like this, but it was the first time I let myself admit what it meant. I built this life carefully, brick by brick, decision by decision. Every morning, I wake at 6:15 and reach for the same chipped blue mug on the nightstand. Clara bought it for me during our first year of marriage, back when she still believed she could learn to love my silences. The coffee is always too strong, but I've never told her. Some habits become too comfortable to correct. The house sits on Maple Street like every other house on Maple Street. White siding, black shutters, a driveway that needs resurfacing. Clara planted roses along the front walkway 3 years ago. They bloom pink and predictable every spring, and the neighbors always compliment them. She smiles and thanks them, but I've seen her stare at those roses sometimes with something that looks like resignation. My son Marcus is 11 and believes he can become a professional baseball player if he practices hard enough. He throws a tennis ball against the garage door every evening after homework, the steady thump becoming part of the soundtrack of our lives. My daughter Sophie is 8 and collects smooth stones from the creek behind the elementary school. She lines them up on her windowsill according to size and color, creating patterns only she understands. They are good children, uncomplicated in the way children should be, before the world teaches them to question the things they feel. I teach 11th grade English at the local high school. Room 237, second floor, windows that look out over the parking lot where teenagers lean against cars and practice being adults. I've been there 14 years now, long enough for the principal to stop checking on my lesson plans, long enough for the other teachers to assume I'm content. Content. That's the word people use about me. Julian Carter, content with his quiet life, his steady job, his reliable presence. The students respect me because I'm fair. The parents trust me because I don't cause problems. Clara married me because I seemed safe. Safety was what she needed then. Her first boyfriend had been volatile, unpredictable, the kind of man who left bruises on more than just her heart. I was the opposite of that. Calm, measured, present without being overwhelming. I proposed to her in her mother's garden on a Sunday afternoon, not because I couldn't live without her, but because it felt like the right thing to do. The next logical step. She said yes with tears in her eyes, and I told myself they were tears of happiness. Our marriage isn't unhappy. We move around each other with practiced ease, like dancers who've learned the steps, so well they don't need to think about the music. She makes dinner while I help the children with homework. I mow the lawn while she sorts laundry. We sit on the couch in the evenings, her reading romance novels, me grading papers, the television playing shows neither of us really watches. Sometimes she reaches for my hand during these quiet hours. Her fingers are soft and familiar, and I hold on because I know I should want to. But even her touch feels like putting on clothes that fit, but were never really made for you. The loneliness of it settles deeper some nights than others. She knows, I think. She's always known something was missing, some part of me that she could never quite reach. But we've built something together, something that works even if it doesn't sing. The children need stability. The mortgage needs paying. Life needs living, even when it feels like sleepwalking. Then Elias came back. We'd grown up 3 houses apart, close enough that we could flash signals with bedroom lamps after our parents thought we were asleep. He was the kind of boy who collected interesting rocks and knew the names of birds, who read books about places we'd probably never see. While other kids played sports or video games, we'd disappear into the woods behind his house for hours, building elaborate stories about the lives we'd live when we escaped this small town. Everyone said we were inseparable. Teachers, parents, the other kids who never quite understood our friendship but accepted it as one of those inexplicable things about childhood. We wrote letters when we went to different colleges, long rambling things about philosophy and literature and the girls we were supposed to be dating. His letters were always more honest than mine. He never married, never even came close, as far as I knew. He moved to Portland after college, found work as a graphic designer, lived in a small apartment near the river. When I visited him there once, years ago, the space felt like him in a way my house has never felt like me. Books stacked everywhere, plants growing in recycled containers, artwork that actually meant something hanging on the walls. Clara had stayed home with the children that weekend. She'd encouraged me to go, said I needed time with my oldest friend. But when I came back, something had shifted. I was quieter than usual, more distant, and she felt it even if she couldn't name it. The call came 3 weeks ago, just after midnight. Clara stirred when the phone rang, but didn't wake fully. I recognized his voice immediately, even though it had been months since we'd talked. His mother was gone, he said. Cancer, quick and brutal. The funeral would be small. He was handling everything alone. I told him I was sorry, that I wished I could be there. He was quiet for a long moment, and then he asked if he could come here afterward. Just for a few days, to figure out what came next. His voice cracked on the last word, and something in my chest cracked with it. Clara stirred beside me, mumbling something about the late hour. I whispered that it was Elias, that his mother had died. Even half asleep, she understood. Of course he should come, she said. Of course he should stay as long as he needed. She rolled back in his sleep, trusting and generous in the way that makes me love her and breaks my heart in equal measure. She had no idea that inviting him here would be like opening the door to a hurricane. That some friendships are too deep, too complicated, too dangerous to fit safely inside the life you've built with someone else. But I said yes anyway, because when Elias needs me, I've never been able to say anything else. His mother's house smells like lavender and old sadness. The scent hits me the moment Elias opens the front door, and I see him pause, his hand still on the doorknob, like he's gathering courage to step inside his own childhood. The rooms look smaller than I remember. Everything does when you're 43 instead of 17. But the blue wallpaper in the kitchen is the same, faded now, but still covered with tiny roses that his mother loved. The wooden table where we used to do homework still sits by the window, scarred from years of pencils and careless elbows. We've been at this for 3 days now, sorting, boxing, deciding what stays and what goes. It's archaeological work, digging through layers of a life. His mother kept everything. Every school photo, every Mother's Day card, every crayon drawing we made during the summers we spent here while our parents worked. I find them in a shoebox in the hall closet. Pictures of us at 12, 13, 14. Elias's arm always around my shoulder, both of us grinning at some joke I can't remember. There's one from the 8th grade play where we're both in costume. I was Benedict, he was Claudio. Even then, I was better at pretending to love women than he was. He finds me staring at that photograph, and his face goes quiet. He takes it from my hands and studies it like he's trying to decode something written in a language he used to know. We were so young, he says. Did we know anything at all? I want to tell him we knew enough. We knew how to make each other laugh. We knew how to keep each other's secrets. We knew how to disappear into the woods for hours and come back with grass stains and stories. We knew what mattered, even if we couldn't name it. But I don't say any of this. Instead, I take the photo back and add it to the pile of things he's keeping. The concert tickets are in his mother's jewelry box, tucked between earrings she never wore and a string of pearls from his grandmother. Pearl Jam, 1994. We drove 3 hours to see them, slept in his car in a Walmart parking lot because we couldn't afford a hotel. I remember the way the music felt that night, like it was coming from inside our chests instead of the stage. I remember how Elias threw his head back during the guitar solos, his hair catching the lights, and how I couldn't stop watching him instead of the band. He holds the tickets between his fingers like they might crumble. I thought she threw these away, he says. I thought she threw away everything from that summer. That was the summer before senior year, before college applications, and the slow recognition that we were about to be separated for the first time in our lives. We spent those months desperate to make every moment count, staying out too late, talking until dawn, acting like teenagers who'd just discovered they weren't going to live forever. The notes come last. Folded scraps of paper we passed in class, observations and jokes and secrets shared in the margins of our real lives. My handwriting was neater then, his was illegible. But reading them now, I can hear our 17-year-old voices as clearly as if we were still sitting in the back row of American history. Meet me at the creek after school. I have something to show you. Did you see the way Henderson looked at us today? Like we're some kind of science experiment. My dad asked why I never talk about girls. I told him I was waiting for the right one. Technically not a lie. That last one makes my chest tight. I remember writing it. Remember the weight of what I wasn't saying even then. Elias had smiled when he read it, but there was something careful in his expression, something that looked like hope and fear wrapped together. By evening, we're both exhausted, surrounded by boxes and the ghosts of decisions we made 25 years ago. The house feels hollow now, echoes where there used to be warmth. Elias sits on the floor in the living room, back against the couch his mother will never sit in again. I can't stay here tonight, he says quietly. It doesn't feel like home anymore. It feels like a museum. I tell him he can come back to our house, that Clara won't mind making up the guest room again. But he shakes his head. Not there either. Could I maybe stay in your den? Just tonight. I just need to not be alone with all this quiet. There's something in his voice I recognize from childhood. The same tone he used when he was scared but trying not to show it. When his parents fought, and he'd call me at midnight. When he broke his wrist falling out of the oak tree and tried to convince me he was fine even with tears running down his face. The den is small, barely more than an alcove off the living room. There's a daybed there that Clara uses for reading, bookshelves filled with novels she never finishes, a lamp that throws soft amber light across everything. It's intimate in a way the guest room isn't. More like being held than being housed. I hesitate for reasons I don't want to examine too closely. But his eyes are pleading, and I've never been able to deny him anything that matters. We end up there after Clara and the children are asleep, sitting cross-legged on the floor with glasses of whiskey between us. The amber light makes everything feel suspended, like we're existing outside of normal time. Elias looks younger in this light, or maybe just more like himself. The whiskey loosens something in both of us. We talk about his mother, about the funeral, about the strange feeling of being the last one left to remember certain stories. But eventually the conversation drifts, the way it always does with us, toward deeper waters. Are you happy? He asks suddenly. The question hangs in the air between us like smoke. Really happy, I mean. Not just content or satisfied or managing. Happy. I take a long sip of whiskey, buying time I don't know how to use. The question feels like a trap, but not the kind meant to hurt. The kind meant to reveal. I tell him happiness is complicated at our age. That I have responsibilities, obligations, a life that depends on me showing up every day. That contentment might be more realistic than happiness. But he doesn't let me hide behind philosophy. He leans forward, and in the lamplight his eyes look the same as they did when we were 17 and thought we could solve all the world's problems before midnight. That's not what I asked, he says gently. The silence stretches between us, heavy with whiskey and honesty and all the things we've spent decades not saying. Outside, the house settles around us like it's listening. Upstairs, Clara sleeps in our bed, trusting that I'm downstairs taking care of an old friend. She has no idea that this old friend is asking me to excavate parts of myself I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten they were still breathing. He never really leaves after that night. Oh, he goes back to his mother's house during the days, continues the slow work of dismantling a life. But every evening he drifts back to us like smoke finding its way under a door. Clara sets a place for him at dinner without being asked. The children accept his presence the way children accept anything that doesn't directly threaten their small universe. Marcus shows him his baseball card collection. Sophie gives him 3 of her smoothest stones. But it's after they're asleep that something shifts in the air of our house. Something I haven't felt in years, maybe ever. When Elias and I sit in the living room with books, or just the quiet between us, the walls seem to breathe differently. The silence isn't empty anymore. It's full of possibility and danger in equal measure. We talk past midnight most nights. Not about anything earth-shattering. Books he's reading, students I'm teaching, memories that surface like bubbles in champagne. But the conversations have weight now, texture. When he laughs at something I say, the sound fills spaces in my chest I'd forgotten existed. I find myself listening for his key in the door, checking the clock when he's later than usual. Making coffee stronger in the mornings because I remember he likes it that way. Small accommodations that feel enormous in their intimacy. Clara notices. Of course she notices. She starts asking careful questions. How long does he think he'll need to stay? Is he looking for work here or planning to go back to Portland? She phrases them like practical concerns, but I hear the real question underneath. She's wondering when our life will return to normal, not knowing that normal might be the thing I'm finally learning to live without. One evening, she finds me laughing at something Elias said about the realtor he's been working with. The sound surprises us both. When did I stop laughing like that? When did joy become such a foreign sensation in my own living room? Everything all right? She asks later as we're getting ready for bed. You seem different lately. Different how? But I already know what she means. I don't know. Lighter somehow. More like yourself. The observation cuts deeper than criticism would have. More like myself. As if the person I've been for the past 15 years is an imposter, and she's relieved to catch glimpses of whoever lived here before him. I tell her I'm fine, just enjoying having an old friend around. She nods and turns back to her book, but I see the way her shoulders hold tension now. The way she watches us when she thinks I'm not looking. She sees how I lean forward when Elias talks, how my voice changes when I'm speaking to him. She notices that I laugh at his stories and actually mean it. That I ask follow-up questions instead of just waiting for my turn to speak. That I'm present in a way I haven't been present for anything in years. The guilt sits heavy in my stomach most days. This good woman who married me in good faith, who built a life around my silences and accepted them as part of loving me. She deserves better than a husband who comes alive only when another man enters the room. But I can't seem to stop myself from coming alive. There are moments when the 3 of us are together that feel like walking a tightrope. Dinner conversations where I have to monitor every word, every glance, every breath. Clara passes the salt to Elias and our hands brush over the same dish. And the current that runs between us is so strong, I'm sure she must feel it too. But she just continues eating, asking him about his day, being gracious in the way she's gracious about everything. If she senses the electricity in the air, she doesn't let on. The children help, in their unaware way. They create distractions, demand attention, fill the spaces where adult awareness might grow too sharp. Sophie shows Elias her latest stone arrangement. Marcus asks if he wants to play catch in the backyard. Normal family moments that feel anything but normal. It's a Tuesday evening when everything crystallizes for me. Clara has gone upstairs early with a headache. The children are asleep. Elias has fallen asleep on the couch while we were watching some documentary about ocean currents that neither of us was really following. I should wake him, send him up to the guest room. Instead, I sit in the armchair across from him and just watch. The lamplight catches the gray that started threading through his dark hair. There are lines around his eyes that weren't there when we were young, but his face in sleep still holds that same peaceful quality that used to make me feel calm just looking at him. His breathing is deep and even. One hand rests on his chest, the other dangles toward the floor. His lips are slightly parted, and I remember with startling clarity what it felt like to be 17 and want to kiss him so badly it made my ribs ache. The one isn't different now. It's just deeper, seasoned with years of pretending it doesn't exist. I don't know how to stop loving you. The words slip out of me like a confession to the empty room. So quietly I barely hear them myself. But saying them aloud, even to the silence, feels like breaking open. Like 30 years of careful construction crumbling all at once. Elias stirs slightly at the sound of my voice, but doesn't wake. His hand shifts against his chest, and for a moment I think he might open his eyes. But he settles back into sleep, and I'm left alone with the echo of my admission hanging in the amber air between us. I've never said those words aloud before. Not to him, not to anyone, not even to myself in the privacy of my own thoughts. But sitting here watching him sleep in my living room, in my life, in the space between what is and what could never be, they feel like the only true thing I've ever spoken. The friendship we've rebuilt these past weeks feels suspended now, fragile as spun glass. Too precious to risk, too dangerous to sustain. Every day he stays makes it harder to remember why I can't reach for him. Every night makes the walls between us feel thinner. Clara will ask more questions soon. The children will start expecting him to be permanent. And I will have to choose between the life I built and the love I buried so deep I convinced myself it had died. But for now, in this moment, with the lamp casting shadows that hide as much as they reveal, I let myself sit with the truth I've been running from for 25 years. I love him. I have always loved him. And no amount of distance or time or careful living has changed that fundamental fact. Upstairs, my wife sleeps in our bed. Down the hall, my children dream their innocent dreams. And here in the living room, the man I love sleeps 3 feet away from me, close enough to touch and impossibly far from reach. The storm hits on a Thursday evening in late September, the kind that makes you remember weather is still wild and unpredictable despite all our careful indoor lives. Thunder rolls across the sky like furniture being moved in heaven's attic, and the rain comes down in sheets that turn the street outside into a river. Clara has taken the children to her sister's for the night, a planned sleepover that suddenly feels loaded with meaning I didn't intend. She'd asked if I wanted to come, and I'd made some excuse about papers to grade. The truth is I couldn't bear the thought of leaving Elias alone in the house during the storm. We're in the den when the lights flicker and die. The sudden darkness feels intimate and dangerous, like being swallowed by something larger than ourselves. I fumble for the candles Clara keeps in the drawer, strike a match, and watch the small flame push back against the night. The candlelight changes everything, makes the familiar room feel ancient, removed from the modern world of electric bills and morning routines. Elias sits cross-legged on the floor, his face half in shadow, and for a moment he looks exactly like he did at 17 when we'd sneak out to sit by the creek and plan our futures. The conversation drifts the way conversations do in candlelight. We talk about high school, about teachers we'd forgotten we remembered, about the way everything felt possible then. About Friday night football games where we sat in the stands pretending to care about touchdowns while really just wanting an excuse to sit close to each other. Remember homecoming junior year? He asks, when you were supposed to take Sarah Mitchell but came down with the flu. I remember, though it wasn't the flu that kept me home that night. I was relieved. He continues, his voice soft in the flickering light. I told myself it was because you wouldn't have to pretend to be interested in some girl for a whole evening. But really it was because I got to spend the night with you instead. The admission hangs between us like smoke from the candles. Outside, the storm intensifies, rain lashing against the windows like it's trying to get in. We ended up watching movies in your basement, I say. Your mom made us popcorn. You fell asleep during the second one. I remember thinking I could watch you sleep forever and never get bored. The words hit me like electricity. All these years later, and he's telling me he felt it too. That those nights I thought I was alone in my wanting, he was right there wanting the same thing. The silence stretches between us, heavy with 25 years of things unsaid. The candle flame wavers in a draft I can't feel, casting dancing shadows on the walls. I used to wonder, he says quietly, what would have happened if you hadn't married Clara? My chest tightens. The question I've forbidden myself to ask, spoken aloud in his voice. I wondered too. The words come out before I can stop them, and immediately the air in the room shifts. Something that's been held tightly coiled for decades suddenly loosens, and I can feel us both struggling to breathe around the magnitude of what we've just admitted. He looks at me across the small space between us, and in the candlelight his eyes hold everything we've never said. All the almosts and what-ifs and careful distances we've maintained to keep our friendship safe. You did? His voice is barely above a whisper. Every day for the first 5 years. Every day since you've been back. The confession feels like stepping off a cliff. Like admitting to a crime I've been committing in my heart for most of my adult life. But saying it aloud doesn't bring relief. It brings terror. Thunder crashes overhead, so close the house seems to shake with it. In the flash of lightning that follows, I see Elias's face clearly for just a moment. See the longing there that mirrors my own, the pain of all this careful wanting. Then his hand moves across the small space between us and covers mine. The world collapses into that touch, into the warmth of his palm against my knuckles, the slight pressure of his fingers. It's such a simple thing, skin on skin, but it feels like everything I've been starving for without knowing it. We don't speak. There aren't words for this moment, for the way my entire nervous system seems to rewire itself around the point where we're connected. For the way 25 years of pretending suddenly feels impossible to sustain. The candle burns lower, wax pooling around its base. The storm outside begins to exhaust itself, rain softening from assault to whisper. But neither of us moves to break the contact. I'm so tired, he says eventually, and there's something broken in his voice. So tired of pretending this doesn't matter. I know what he means. The exhaustion of carrying love like a secret. Of loving someone so completely that their absence aches in your bones, but never being able to say so. He shifts closer, and I feel the warmth of his shoulder against mine. Feel the solid weight of him settling against my side like he belongs there. Like all these years of sitting carefully apart were just practice for this moment. His breathing slows and deepens as the storm passes overhead. His head finds my shoulder, and his hand stays over mine. Fingers loosely intertwined now in a way that feels both natural and revolutionary. This is how we end up in the guest bedroom later, though I'm not sure how we get there. Maybe I help him upstairs when the candles burn out. Maybe he asks me to stay, just until he falls asleep. The details blur together, less important than the result. I lie rigid beside him in the narrow bed, feeling the rise and fall of his chest, the warmth of his breath against my neck. His arm settles across my chest like it did that first night, but now I understand the weight of it differently. This isn't just comfort. This isn't just friendship. This is love, finally allowed to exist in the space between sleeping and waking, where the rules of our careful lives don't quite apply. I whisper his name into the darkness, but he's already asleep, exhausted by grief and truth in equal measure. So I lie awake feeling the weight of his touch, the solid reality of him beside me, and finally allow myself to name what I've been carrying all these years. I love him. I have always loved him. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm too tired to pretend otherwise. The days after the storm pass like I'm walking underwater. Everything feels muffled, distant, like I'm experiencing my own life through thick glass. I go through the motions of normalcy. Make coffee in the chipped blue mug. Drive the familiar route to school. Stand in front of 17-year-olds and talk about metaphor and symbolism while my own life becomes nothing but metaphor and symbolism. But inside, I'm coming apart. Every time Clara speaks to me, I hear the echo of Elias saying my name in the darkness. Every time she reaches for my hand, I remember the weight of his fingers intertwined with mine. The guilt sits in my stomach like something poisonous, spreading through my system until I can barely eat, barely sleep, barely look at my own reflection. I start avoiding her. Not obviously, not cruelly, but in the small ways that marriages allow. I get up earlier for coffee, claiming I have papers to grade. I stay later at school, reorganizing lesson plans that don't need reorganizing. When she asks about my day, I give her the abbreviated version, the one that leaves out the part where I stood at my classroom window for 20 minutes thinking about Elias's hands. She notices. Of course she notices. Clara has always been observant, attuned to the subtle weather patterns of our household. She starts asking if I'm feeling all right, if there's something I want to talk about. Her concern only makes the guilt worse. Elias has finished clearing out his mother's house. The realtor thinks it will sell quickly. There's no reason for him to stay anymore, except that neither of us can seem to bring up the subject of him leaving. He's become part of our daily routine, woven into the fabric of our evenings in ways that feel both natural and unsustainable. But something has shifted since the night of the storm. We don't talk about what happened, don't acknowledge the words that were spoken or the touch that changed everything. Instead, we exist in this strange suspended state, like actors who've forgotten their lines but have to keep performing the play. I catch myself staring at him more often now. The way he holds his coffee cup, the way he listens when Sophie tells him elaborate stories about her stones, the way his eyes crinkle when he laughs at something Marcus says. These observations feel stolen, illicit, like I'm seeing him naked when he doesn't know I'm looking. The breaking point comes on a Tuesday night. Clara and I are getting ready for bed, moving through our established routine of face washing and toothbrushing and the small domestic rituals that mark the end of another day. She's wearing the blue nightgown I bought her for Christmas 3 years ago, and she looks pretty in it, soft and familiar in the lamplight. But when she sits on the edge of the bed and pats the space beside her, something in me recoils. The thought of lying down next to her, of pretending to be the husband she deserves, feels impossible suddenly, like wearing a costume that no longer fits. I make an excuse about not being tired, about wanting to read for a while. She nods and slides under the covers, but I see the hurt in her eyes. We used to talk before sleep, share the small observations and worries that make up a life together. When did that stop? When did I start treating her like a stranger in her own bedroom? I go downstairs and find Elias reading in the den, curled up on the daybed with a novel I don't recognize. He looks up when I enter, and something passes between us that feels dangerous and necessary. "Can't sleep?" he asks. Something like that. He makes room for me on the narrow bed, and I sit beside him without thinking about what it means. We don't talk. We don't touch. But the space between us hums with everything we're not saying. When I finally go upstairs, Clara is still awake. I can tell by the way she's breathing, too controlled to be natural sleep. But she doesn't say anything when I slide into bed beside her, doesn't ask where I've been or why I'm so distant lately. The questions come the next evening. I'm in the kitchen making coffee when she appears in the doorway, still in her work clothes, but with something different in her posture. A kind of resolve I recognize from the early days of our marriage, when she was still fighting for things instead of accepting them. "We need to talk," she says. The words every married person dreads. I pour my coffee slowly, buying time I don't know how to use. About what? You know about what. She sits at the table, the same table where we've shared thousands of meals, where we've helped our children with homework and paid bills and made plans for vacations we may never take. But tonight it feels like a different piece of furniture entirely. Tonight it feels like a witness stand. "You've been different since Elias came back," she says quietly. "More distant. Like you're somewhere else even when you're sitting right here." I tell her I'm just tired, that work has been stressful, that having a house guest is an adjustment. All true things that don't touch the real truth at all. She nods like she expected these answers. Like she's been preparing for this conversation longer than I realized. "Do you love him?" The question hangs in the air between us like something sharp and glittering, for words that contain the power to destroy everything we've built together. I don't answer immediately. I can't. My throat feels closed, my chest tight with the magnitude of what she's asking me to admit. The silence stretches between us, and I see her face change as she reads my inability to speak. See the moment when my silence becomes answer enough. "Oh," she says softly. "Oh, Julian." There are tears in her eyes, but they're not angry tears. They're the kind of tears that come with recognition, with the settling of something that's been unsettled for too long. "I've always loved him," I hear myself say, "even when we were kids, even when I married you. I thought I could make it not matter, but I can't. I don't know how." The admission feels like bleeding out, like confessing to a crime I didn't know I was committing until this moment. She's quiet for a long time, looking down at her hands folded on the table. When she speaks, her voice is steadier than I expected. "I've known," she says. "Not the whole truth, maybe, but I've known something was missing. Some part of you that you never let me reach. I told myself it would come with time, that you'd learn to love me the way I loved you. But it never did it?" The gentleness in her voice breaks something in me. She should be angry. She should be screaming, throwing things, demanding explanations I don't have. Instead, she's sitting there with tears on her cheeks, grieving the marriage we both tried so hard to make work. "I'm sorry," I tell her. "I'm so sorry, Clara. You deserved better than this." "Maybe," she says. "But I chose this. I chose you, knowing something wasn't right. I thought love could be enough, even if it wasn't the kind of love I wanted it to be." She stands up from the table, moves to the window that looks out over the backyard where our children play, where we've hosted birthday parties and barbecues and all the ordinary celebrations that make up a family life. "I need you to leave," she says without turning around. "Not forever, not until we figure out what this means for the children. But I need you to go tonight. I need time to think without you here, making me remember how much I wanted this to work." Her words hit me like a physical blow, not because they're cruel, but because they're so completely reasonable, so full of the dignity I've been systematically eroding with my careful silences and stolen glances. I pack a suitcase in our bedroom while she sits with the children, explaining that Daddy has to go away for a little while. I don't know what she tells them, but I hear Marcus ask if it's because of Elias, and her voice gets very quiet when she answers. When I come downstairs with my bag, she's waiting by the front door. The same door Elias walked through 3 weeks ago, changing everything just by needing a place to stay. "Take care of yourself," she says. "Figure out what you want your life to look like. But don't come back until you know." I stand in the doorway of my own house, suitcase in hand, looking back at the life I've spent 15 years building. The family photos on the hallway table. The children's artwork stuck to the refrigerator with magnets. The evidence of a good life, a stable life, a life that should have been enough. But as I pull the door closed behind me, I know there's no going back to pretending it ever was. I don't drive to him immediately. Instead, I sit in my car outside the house I can no longer call home, engine running, watching the windows glow with the warm light of other people's lives. Clara moving through the kitchen, probably making tea the way she does when she needs to think. The children's silhouettes passing by their bedroom windows as they get ready for sleep. I could go to a hotel. That would be the reasonable thing to do. Give everyone space to process what's happened, what's been admitted, what can never be taken back. But reasonable feels impossible right now, and space feels like the last thing I need. The drive to his mother's house takes 12 minutes through streets I've known my entire life. Past the high school where I teach, past the diner where Clara and I had our first date, past the church where we were married 17 years ago. Everything looks the same as it did this morning, but I feel like I'm seeing it all from a different planet. The house is dark except for one window in what used to be the living room. His car is in the driveway, and there's something about seeing it there that makes this real in a way it hasn't been yet. This choice I'm making, this life I'm walking toward. I find him sitting on the floor in the empty living room, surrounded by the last few boxes that haven't made their way to charity or storage. The furniture is gone, the walls bare except for the faint outlines where family photos once hung. It looks like a crime scene in reverse, evidence of a life being carefully erased. He looks up when I appear in the doorway, and I see the question in his eyes before he can voice it. The wariness of someone who's been hoping for something too long to trust that it might actually be happening. I don't say anything. Words feel inadequate for this moment, for the magnitude of what I've done and what I'm doing. Instead, I set my suitcase down beside the door and wait for him to understand what it means. The recognition moves across his face like sunrise. Slow, then sudden, then everywhere at once. Clara? He asks quietly. She knows. She's always known, I think. But now she knows that I know. We look at each other across the empty room, and I feel the weight of 25 years of careful distance finally lifting. All the almost touches and swallowed words and nights spent lying awake wanting what I couldn't let myself want. Are you sure? He asks. No, I'm not sure about anything except that I can't go back to pretending anymore. I can't keep building a life around the shape of something that was never there. He nods like he understands exactly what I mean. Like he's been carrying the same weight, the same careful architecture of denial. The house settles around us, empty and echoing. Soon it will belong to someone else. We'll fill up with different furniture and different voices and different dreams. But tonight it's ours, this space between what was and what might be. I sit down on the floor across from him, and we don't talk about what comes next. We don't make promises or declarations or plans. We just sit in the quiet, two middle-aged men finally allowing themselves to occupy the same space without apology. The silence doesn't feel empty like it did in my marriage. It feels full of possibility, rich with all the conversations we'll have and all the ones we won't need to have. For the first time in my adult life, I don't feel like I'm performing being myself. Outside, the neighborhood sleeps. Inside, we sit with our backs against opposite walls, looking at each other across the space where his mother's coffee table used to be, where we sat as children planning futures we couldn't have imagined would look like this. I think about Clara tucking our children into bed, about the explanations I'll have to give and the custody arrangements we'll need to work out, and the 1,000 practical details that come with dismantling a life. All of that waits for tomorrow. Tonight there's only this. The two of us in an empty house, finally admitting that some loves are too big to fit inside the lives we think we're supposed to live. The storm has passed, both outside and in. What remains is quieter than I expected. Not the dramatic resolution of movies or books, but something simpler and more real. Just two people choosing each other, finally, after decades of choosing everything else. For the first time and longer than I can remember, the silence feels like home.